I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: is Trump responsible for the mail bomber? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because last week Sky News UK published the following op-ed piece from their American correspondent. Is there a link between mail bombs and Donald Trump's rhetoric? And you know straight away, based on the tenure of that question, the headline of this op-ed piece, that they are going to try and make the case that Donald Trump is actually responsible for the actions of an unhinged lunatic. Now, what I want to do in this video is I want to try and perhaps strip out the politics a little bit. Now, I know that's going to be hard, because I really want to get to the principle of what's going on here, the flawed thinking here, which underpins this particular approach. So if we could think about principle instead of politics, that would be really helpful. So perhaps to aid you in thinking about the principle rather than the politics of this particular scenario, imagine for a second this incident didn't involve Donald Trump. Imagine this incident involved a politician that you are quite friendly towards, say someone like Barack Obama or Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. Imagine a person, a politician who you admire, you think has got the goods to be president, or who you think, man, I wish that person was president of the United States. And as I read this opinion column, I want you to imagine that this scenario in this opinion column applies to that person, that they are talking about this person, that this incident actually involved that person as the president and one of their supporters doing one of these kind of things, like sending out these hokey homemade bombs in the post to people. Who would target Barack Obama, his intelligence chief, his attorney general, Hillary Clinton, the head of her party's campaign machine, and a big liberal donor? Who that is, apart from Donald Trump. While no one is suggesting that the president is the one who posted bombs to key US political figures, they certainly dislike the same people. So in other words, even though he's saying no one here is actually suggesting this, he is actually suggesting this. This is very typical now of mainstream media gaslighting. I'm not saying that it is this way, but in actual fact, I really am saying that it is this way. The bomber or bombers share the president's distaste for big-name Democrats. Richard Nixon famously had an enemies list. If Donald Trump had one, the targets of recent days would feature high on it as well. For example, not many Americans would have heard of Congresswoman Maxine Waters until Trump started his relentless low IQ, quote-unquote, attacks on her. Why would she then be the member of Congress targeted? Well, in actual fact, this is quite absurd, because Maxine Waters is a very long-serving elected representative in the United States. She's been in an elected position since 1990, I believe. Not only that, but she also came to prominence many, many years ago after the LA riots and some of the work she did in the aftermath of those Rodney King LA riots. She stepped up there and became actually quite well known in the American consciousness for her involvement there. And also last year, there was a very big New York Times article about her where she was talking about her dislike of Trump. And I'm going to quote from that article in just a minute, but she was really forthright in what she was doing and how she viewed Trump and how she was going to be conducting herself in office. So I think the idea to claim that no one had really heard of this woman and she's only famous because Donald Trump signaled her out is just simply not true at all. For all the president's somber tone and message of unity and togetherness at the White House, plenty believe he has helped set the tone that is the background to the attempted bombings. What do you mean plenty believe? What you actually mean is a group of us inside the mainstream media bubble have decided that this is the way it is, and we keep reading each other's articles and opinion columns and chatting over our vino about how we think that he's to blame for this, and then all of a sudden in our mind we think there is this mass group of people who are actually thinking in this non-contrived kind of way about this issue. In actual fact, when you talk about the plenty, what you're really talking about is people inside your bubble. In rallies from behind the screen of Secret Service protection, he talked of punching people in the face and dragging them out on stretchers. If he believes that doesn't encourage violence, some obviously see it differently. And within hours of calling for a new tone, he was on the campaign trail in Wisconsin blaming the media for making things so bad bad in the first place, and he's not wrong. Everyone knows that the media has played a huge role in the current furor and the way in which they have chosen to conduct themselves. It is only people who are inside the media who are currently incapable of actually recognizing that most people outside of the media now who are thinking about these issues and trying to maintain, I guess, as a sense of objectivity and observing from a distance about what's going on, can see that the media in America, a lot of the mainstream media, have set themselves up as being in opposition to Donald Trump. Now, whether or not they are justified in doing that, that is exactly what they've done, and they have really ratcheted up the rhetoric, and they have, in fact, actually added to this problem. If we thought anything would be different, we were wrong. Again, he's talking here about the royal we. There is no question that the responsibility for sending deadly devices through numerous hands to target specific individuals lies squarely with the perpetrator. Well, if that really was true, you actually believe that to be true, you wouldn't be writing this op-ed piece, because this whole op-ed piece is actually trying to suggest that Donald Trump actually shares blame for this as well. So the idea that you think it lies solely with this particular person clearly isn't really true, otherwise you wouldn't be writing this op-ed piece. How many people could have been killed or wounded by any of those devices going off accidentally or intentionally? It doesn't bear thinking about. But Americans can't see this in isolation. So in other words, you've just wound back what you initially said a couple of sentences ago, that, you know, the blame for this lies solely with the bomber. But in actual fact, no, it doesn't just lie solely with the bomber. I'm now going to try and implicate other people as well. For every action, there is a reaction. And when the most powerful man on the planet speaks, people listen. So in other words, again, he's trying to implicate Donald Trump now. And this has been a trend that we've seen in the media in the last couple of days. But here's the thing. Like I said, last year, the New York Times published an article with Maxine Waters. And let me quote to you from that article. Ms. Waters never seems to tire of pressing this case. She has labelled Mr. Trump a, quote-unquote, disgusting, poor excuse of a man. She has called Mr. Trump and his associates, quote-unquote, the Kremlin clan. That's with a K, as in KKK, clan. And began calling for his impeachment soon after he took office. So if this applies to Donald Trump, why wouldn't it also apply to Maxine Waters and the way she's ratcheting up this very broken public square around the political discourse? And what about Hillary Clinton? So Hillary Clinton, remember in the presidential election and during that race, and you're talking here about two people who, outside of the outgoing US President Barack Obama, are the two most powerful figures in the public square probably at that time. And Hillary Clinton famously declares a whole group of Americans, a very large section of the American population, to be a basket of deplorables. Remember that moment? Is that okay? Is that helping to actually foster genuine unity, or is that helping to foster the kind of divisions which lead to this kind of chaos? And remember just about a week or so back when Hillary Clinton appears in a media interview and she says, quote unquote, you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. Is it okay for her to say those kind of things? And why are those not being targeted by you in this op-ed piece and critiqued for the way in which they also help to ratchet up this kind of stuff? What about the way in which the media has treated Antifa? And it really has, at best, you would say, taken a kid's glove type approach to Antifa. They haven't really called them out for what they are, which is violent political extremists. Instead, they've chosen to paint them as if they're some sort of legitimate form of political response in the current climate. How has that not contributed to this crisis? And what about all those celebrities who have joked or talked openly about the idea of political assassination, blowing up the White House, etc.? What about all of that kind of stuff? These are powerful people who hold powerful positions in the public square. Why are they not being critiqued by you for their actions in regards to helping to foster this current climate? Why is it that just a couple of days ago, the media publishes a series of fictional accounts about the Trump presidency, and one of those fictional accounts involves a fantasy or a fictionalized account of a political assassination? How is that helping this particular discourse? How is that helping to keep a clear, even tone in all of this? It's not. It's not, and anyone who's sitting outside this can see the big problem here. The media is trying to present itself as the principled player here, or certainly the guy writing this op-ed is. In actual fact, he's part of a machine that is not principled at all, that is highly politicized, and that is actually helping to foster the very problems that he claims to be concerned about. The FBI will catch the bomber, there is no doubt about that, and we will then find out what really did motivate their ugly actions. Well, it seems to be that he's mentally unstable, and that's sort of hardly surprising. The worry is that this becomes just another colourful chapter in the wacky world of Trump's America and is forgotten by next week. The normalisation of the extraordinary is a daily occurrence again. And what are you, the media, doing to contribute to that? And it sort of seems a little bit rich to me to be complaining about things like this being forgotten by next week, when the media is the one who largely, or is the reason why our news cycle is just such a breakneck thing now, and why in which they obsess over an issue and then very quickly move on. I don't know who else you can really blame for that, apart from that culture that now exists within the media, which sort of propagates this breakneck approach. And a very shallow and superficial and salacious approach to exploring these issues. Many have already made up their minds about this, and depressingly, in today's tribal and divided America, even something as extreme as this will serve to change very few of them. Now that sounds like a very principled final statement until you stop and realise that it's coming at the end of an op-ed piece which is all about trying to blame the president for the actions of an unhinged individual who has nothing to do with the president. And in actual fact, this is nothing more than tribalism itself. This op-ed piece is part of that tribalism. It's not just fostering it, it's actually written from a tribalist perspective. This is coming from the mainstream media, which has completely ignored, as I've just said previously, those other examples where people on the other side of the political aisle have actually engaged in conduct which is fostering those kind of divisions and, very worryingly, could actually lead to genuine acts of terrorism because of the extremeness of what's being said. They've ignored all that. Why? Because it's politically expedient to ignore that. They're part of their tribe, so they ignore it. But all of a sudden, when something like this happens, they see an opportunity to engage in a bit of gaslighting. It's a political opportunist dream come true. Here's something we can take and we can utilize as part of our tribalism to try and say, orange man bad, other lady good, or whoever it happens to be that they think is good in this particular scenario. It's not helping. It's just not helping. And one of the big problems here that the media has, again in this final paragraph, why don't people take this seriously? Well, because people just don't take the media as seriously anymore because they have a credibility problem. And that credibility problem is of their own making, particularly in US politics. The moment they decided to en masse set themselves up as this tribe against the sitting president to become highly politicized was the moment that everyone began to recognize that they were no longer acting as the fourth estate. They were no longer acting as that objective, independent critiquer of what goes on in politics. They were now very much part of the political machine. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal or Patreon. There is a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.